Happy Wednesday, everybody. It's the third episode of Pain and Revival podcast with Nevaeh Grace and my name, Dr. Michael O'Halloran, coming live from Georgia and New York. We want to share a little bit today about a couple different topics, some of them kind of sensitive, but I start every day with a scripture I like to post, and I share it on social media, and I started during COVID. And then when I stopped doing it, people reached out from around the country and even around the world and said, Doc, why'd you stop with the scriptures? And I said, it was just really something I did for myself, but then people really enjoyed them. So one of my favorite verses, which I'm just going to read to you now from John 10:10, it said, I have come that you may have life and have it to the full. And people have different ideas about what life is and what full is. And we have a sensitive topic we want to talk about today. And I'm going to have Nevaeh get started on that. So Nevaeh, what?
So today I kind of thought we should talk about suicide because this month is National Suicide Prevention Awareness Month. And suicide rates, we just looked up the statistics. Suicide rates are up 62% in children ages 10 to 15 from 2007 to 2017, which is a crazy statistic. And I feel like you talking about full of life, and like I had mentioned before, is children, we are born full of life. We are born with the Holy Spirit in us. That is literally what we are. But over time, we get beat down. And I think the world today it's a really harsh place to be in. And that's like, I'm not making a political statement. It just is. It's a really harsh place to be in. And it's causing suicide rates to go up. And it's something that we should shed light on and show that there is hope for people still.
Now, first of all, I'm going to ask you, just share with the audience, how old are you?
14.
So at 14 years of age, as opposed to, and this is why our podcast is so successful, and we want to thank all the people that reached out to us last week and thanked us for the topics we talked about. And if you have anything you want us to talk about, we're going to do this every week. So share it with one of us. You can find both of us on social media. We're starting an Instagram page. We're starting all kinds of social marketing. But one of the key things with the difference between a 14-year-old and a 64-year-old is there's different stresses in our lives. And at 14, what do you think a stress could be in somebody's life that would make them even think of something as serious as suicide?
So to think of something as serious as suicide, something big has to happen. So like, your parents getting divorced. And as most people know, divorce rates are up. And that's a big thing for children. It affects your children. When you get a divorce, it does affect especially teenagers, because that's their time. That's where they're learning to be who they are. They're looking at their mentors around them, and your mentors would be your parents. But also just different things like bullies. There's lots of cases where people get bullied to the point where they kill themselves. They don't want to do it anymore. No one looks forward to getting told something bad about themselves. Like, in the morning when you wake up, it's not like, yeah, I'm ready to go to school and get bullied. Like, I'm so excited. Like, no one thinks that.
So go ahead. I'm sorry. Finish. Yeah.
So the point is it's like, those are different things, like stressors. And as little as it could seem to like an adult who's like got bills and different things like that, that could seem so little. But to a teenager, when that's literally their life, that's such a big problem for them. And it can drive them to suicide.
Yeah. And what you see right now is our family unit isn't what it was years ago. Like, I grew up and it was just dad worked, mom stayed home and took care of the kids. You had one car. If you went somewhere, it was usually as a family. Saturday, mom went and got our hair done. So dad had the boys, in my case, the 3 boys, and he took care of us. But the family unit was different. And now here in 2024, the family unit's kind of broken. And do you think the breakages is what increases people's thought process to this negativity? Or is it just our society has changed that much? Because truthfully, when I look at the world, I still look at the world as beautiful. But I work on myself to keep the world beautiful. What do you think?
Yeah. So I think partly it's your perspective. Like, you look at the world and see beauty. Some people look at the world and see cruelness. And it's really, it depends on your perspective. And we talked about it last week, but perspective really matters. And I do think it's also the family dynamic is very different now than what it was a little while ago. So 2024, I definitely think the family dynamic is a little different. A lot of people, like I said, are in broken homes, so the family dynamic is really messed up. Or like in my case, I never had a father. It was just my mom and my mom's mom. So I grew up in a house of women, and a house of women that hated men, in fact. So it's a rough, but it's hard to grow up in something like that. In an abusive home or things like that. And we also talked about like lots of people are drug addicts now, alcoholics, and some of them don't even realize it, but they are, and it's affecting their children, and it's affecting your relationships with other people. But because you're so focused on whatever is driving you to drink or driving you to do drugs, you're so internally focused, you're not thinking about anyone else. And that's really my opinion, and you can add whenever. But it is, when you are an alcoholic or you're a drug addict, you are just thinking about yourself. You're not thinking about your kids. You're not thinking about your husband or wife. You're not thinking about anybody else except for yourself, because you're drowning in that pity that you have for whatever you went through, and it's driving your children to commit suicide.
And I think what happens too a little bit now too is you see with social media, as we shared a little bit earlier, you and I were talking before we got started, is it makes everybody look like they have a perfect family. I call it like the Facebook family. So you go on there and you see this beautiful family, and they're in Cancun on vacation, and they're having a wonderful time, and it looks like mom and dad are having a great time, and the kids are doing wonderful, and everybody's getting together and getting along well. And then you watch TV and social media, and everything makes drugs and alcohol, and at such a young age that they're really changing the way people actually think. That
We're recording.
So that's all right. So what happens is, so they glamorize it. So, and then what happens is maybe someone that's young, or maybe, and you can share on this a little bit, maybe someone that's 14 or 15 years of age says, hey, you know what, there's something glamorous about drinking alcohol, because I look and I see people, sipping martinis on TV, and they're going to the music video awards, and everybody's partying and having a great time. Do you think that affects it?
I think it does. I mean, yeah, we're glorifying it and we're making it look really good, and it's not. It can lead to. I don't know. I'm not like slamming you if you do drink or something. No, occasionally, that's fine. But when it's something that you literally rely on, you have an addiction, and by glorifying it on TV and the VMAs, like you said, all these things that we're like, yeah, drinking's good. It does affect it, because it kind of probably psychologically makes you think like, oh, it's really okay for you to be able to do that, but it's not. But I think for me, like I came from a different situation where I think when I see people doing drugs and drinking, I see bad, because I know what it did to my mom and I know what it did to my dad. But when you grow up in a home where people just drink and they do whatever, and it's like glorified, like you said, it's not. I didn't.
Or they drinking to try and kill the pain of what they're actually experiencing. That a lot of times in our society too, and having patients come in, and people that have addiction disorders and so forth, is a lot of times people don't realize is alcohol, drugs, these are all neurotoxins. And neurotoxins, what they do is affect your brain. So your brain then gets addicted to a neurotoxin. So the addiction comes, it's actually a chemical imbalance in your brain. So it's not like you just drink and drink and drink till you become an alcoholic. There's certain people that can have just a couple drinks or try a drug once, and now they just love that feeling. So just like somebody that's a marathon runner, they start to run and they get what they call an endorphin high. So every time they run, the body produces more endorphins. Endorphins make you feel great, makes you feel happy. But the key is an endorphin is something natural, where we take a neurotoxin and we put it in our bodies. And now all of a sudden it changes our cognitive thinking. It changes how we actually react to situations. It causes us the next day to not be happy, causes our tolerance to increase. But then what happens is we have a decrease in our activity level. And our activity level decreases, our endorphin level decreases, and our body starts to want more of something that makes us feel good. Yeah. And that ends up leading to, more problems.
Yeah, and I'm taking a psychology class right now, so this is like all like, yeah, this is so familiar. But we had just talked about addictions too and how to overcome them and things like that. And we talked about endorphins and dopamine. You know, you're getting a dopamine hit when you drink and when you do things like that. So it's all very psychological. But you can still overcome it. Now, not by us saying all of this stuff. Yes, it is psychological. Yes, it is hard to overcome, but you can overcome it. And we're also just trying to shed light on the fact that addiction is bad, and we shouldn't glorify it. But in the society that we live in, unfortunately, stuff like that is glorified, and it's cool to be doing things like that, but it's not.
And now go back to, we tapped on briefly about bullying. Like I find, and I hear in my world as an adult, I don't see it as much, but I shouldn't say I do see it, because I see people, they like to fight right now about politics. So when you're a supporter of this candidate or you're a supporter of this candidate, years ago, prior to social media, you could have a discussion with someone. You could have a Republican and a Democrat. They could have a discussion. They shook hands when it was over and it was done. Now on social media, it becomes a battle, because you don't have to confront somebody. You don't have to actually see them face to face. So you actually have cyberbullying during political, like right now, it's election season. We have President Trump coming to Long Island tomorrow and to do some kind of a rally. And it's funny that I look at the social media pages, and I'm not endorsing anybody right now. Okay, I'm just shedding light on the subject. But people cyberbully each other right now in my own community. Okay, because if you go into the rally, you're bad. If you're not going to the rally, you're bad. And so I think that cyberbullying has really, really, really increased with adults, the way they fight with each other. But with kids, it's got to really be bad, right? Because you guys know more about cyber space than we do.
Oh, I mean, yeah, 100%. We experience a lot of bullying. I mean, not me personally. I try to stay out of it. I don't not have bullies. Everyone has a bully. Everyone's getting like slammed by someone. If you're not, you're doing something wrong.
Yeah.
But I think it's definitely big among us teenagers, and I think, like we were talking about, it does, like I said earlier, it does drive people to commit suicide, because you get up every day and what do? You pick up your phone, and when you pick up your phone, you have people telling you like, yeah, you're horrible, this is like whatever, and they're constantly you get that constant hit. Like back in the day, bullying was like, you go to school and you have this kid, he steals your lunch money or something. Like that's how I always pictured it. I don't know,
that's what it was. Went to school,
like that's
school, and you had a fist fight, and then 2 days later you were friends again.
Yeah, no, but that's not how it is anymore.
Yeah.
Because today, like everyone has one, pretty much. I mean, there might be like one or two kids, and you're gonna get bullied if you don't. But there's like one or two kids who doesn't have a phone. But if you do, that person can talk, and they're not afraid to. Like you're not gonna get in a fight. No one's ever gonna actually say anything about it.
Crazy.
So we just talk because it feeds people's egos, and people are hurt and they don't know how to deal with it. So we talk, and we talk about other people, and we don't have to take ownership in it because it's through a screen. You can't see my face. You don't know what and a lot of people, they lie. Like I'm rambling, but a lot of people lie. They're like, yeah, no, I didn't say that. My cousin did it or something. It's like, they just don't want to take ownership. So bullying. Go ahead.
And what I see, what happens too, is even with adults, is like I said, is in the world of social media, like you'll just unfriend somebody, okay? Yeah. But the problem is because you never see that person. Like I love when people are fighting on social media and they're arguing with the guy, and he's from Eau Claire, Wisconsin, and you're from Massapequa, New York, and I'm like, do you really think it's going to change their mind, or is it really your job to change that person's mind? Like if you have your point of view, can't you just enjoy your point of view and do it in a peaceful way? That's the way the world used to be. But with an increase in technology, an increase in stress, an increase in people, I think, vibrating at a much lower level than they used to, because they have too much stimulation too quick. Like they can just grab this at any given time and find out any information in the world they want. If anything negative happens in the world, they find out about it in 2 seconds. Like people always say, oh God, the world is such a terrible place. I'm like, it really isn't. I said, the world is just as beautiful as it always was. The problem is anything negative that happens in the world, you used to maybe have to wait 2 or 3 days to find out about it in a newspaper. Now you find out about it in 2 seconds. So people think the world isn't what it used to be, but the world is just as beautiful and incredible as it ever was before. And as I started before in the beginning, it says, I have come that you may have life and have it to the full. So it's really what you're focusing on. So if you can really focus on the positive in the world and the beauty in the world and not be so wrapped up in social media, like when you come home from work, don't just jump on your iPad and just research. Go take a walk, man. Enjoy nature. That's how you increase your endorphin production. That's how you increase dopamine production. And if your eyes get used to seeing good in the world, you know what you attract more of? Good.
Right. Yeah. No, I totally agree. I think that's since what we were trying to like talk about a little bit is suicide, I think that's a good way is like when you feel suicidal or you get that urge, because you may not know, but when for someone who struggles with that,
Yeah.
you kind of get like this urge. And even like nothing could be happening, but it's kind of like you're just like, oh, I just kind of don't I feel uncomfortable, I don't want to be here anymore.
Have you ever had
So
the urge?
oh
You
yeah.
personally?
Yeah.
Really?
Yeah.
Could you share with our viewers a little bit about it?
Yeah, so when I was living with my mom, I was being abused and I was focusing very negatively. Like everything in my surrounding me was negative. My environment was everything was negative. And it kind of drove me to be a little bit of a negative person. I mean, I was 10 and I have like tried to commit suicide before. I've cut myself, like crazy stuff. Um, something some people probably wouldn't expect that, but it's all stuff that I've been through, so I get it. um and sometimes, yeah, you still get urges. I don't think you ever fully recover because it's almost like an addiction, if you will. Like suicidal thoughts, especially the thoughts, because you can't control the thoughts. You can, but sometimes stuff just comes in your head and it's just like, oh, why is that here? And if you have a lot of excess like stuff going on in your life, it often does make that thought become more than just a thought. And you might try to put action behind it. You might cut yourself, whatever it is you might do. But it is really hard to overcome that thing. Like I will say for me, coming out of the environment that I did, like making the switch from living with my mom, who was abusive and drug addict, crazy, all the things, from making that switch to going into a healthy environment, it
And
did it.
this is what I want you to share a little bit about with our viewers, because you've gone at 14 years of age from when you were 10 years of age. So in 4 years, and I want you to share with this journey for, if you could, for a minute or two, to now you travel literally around the country and the world, okay, representing a malpractice insurance company, okay, representing chiropractic, representing the Dynamic Essentials, which is one of the largest chiropractic movements in the world. And you're at 14 years of age going around sharing, working, traveling. And what do? Do you homeschool yourself? How do you actually even go to school?
So technically, I'm enrolled in an online private school. So
Okay,
I watch videos and I answer questions and I take exams and all that. I do everything that everyone else
cool. How
does.
you doing in school?
I'm doing great. I have A's and B's as always. So I'm
And
doing great.
like, what are you doing this week? Where are you going to be this week?
We're going to New York.
You're
We're
coming to
coming to
New
New
York.
York
Okay.
for
So you're
a
traveling from
chiropractic
Georgia to
conference.
New and what are you going to be doing?
We're coming to for a chiropractic conference. I'm representing ChiroFutures Malpractice Insurance. So yeah.
So incredible. So you've gone from that point to from being 10 years of age with contemplating, and you still say sometimes you have these thoughts, but what could you tell people maybe that somebody's sitting watching one of our podcasts and saying, what, she did this, but she's beautiful. The doctor always says she's, as I always say every time, you're wise beyond your years. Like I feel like I'm talking to a fellow 60-year-old person and not for anything other than your knowledge. But
Mhm.
what could you tell somebody that's maybe having those thoughts? What could they do different? What could they?
It's that's a good question. I think it really depends. I think for you, what you should, my advice is, you should sit down, and it's going to be really uncomfortable, like extremely uncomfortable.
Mm,
But sit down with your thoughts and like write down what's really, why do I have this thought? Like, because you're not just suicidal just because that sounds fun, because it
okay.
doesn't. It's not like that's just coming into your head. It's coming into your head for a reason. And I think, and this is what my therapist told me to do, and this is what I'm going to tell you to do because it really does help, is sit down and think about it. Like, what is the root cause? Because if you don't get to the root cause, you can do all these things, you can do therapies, you can do everything else, but it's not actually going to fix anything. So for me, I had to sit down and be like, hey, what is causing these thoughts in my head? And obviously, it didn't happen until after I stopped living with my mom, because me committing suicide was not my number one thought. I was trying not to die from my mother. So I'm like, if you're in a situation like what I was in, like an abusive situation, please get out of the abusive situation first. Get out of that first so that you can focus on yourself, because when you're in an abusive situation, all you can focus on is survival. How am I going to get out?
Just to tell our viewers, how did you get out of your abusive situation? Did you reach family members? Did you contact social services? Like, how did you actually physically do it?
So it's kind of a long story, but to make it short, I came from a DE, and Dr. Steve Judson gave a talk about being selfish.
Okay.
Selfish. Yeah, selfish. And I had never had that thought process, like being selfish, that it's okay sometimes. Obviously not all the time. You should be obsessed with yourself, but occasionally it is okay to be selfish. And so he gave this talk, and that kind of like put the thought on my head, like, hey, you should maybe be a little selfish right now and leave the situation, because I knew it wasn't right. But then I went to my aunt's house, and my aunt told me to leave the situation, because I begged. I was crying on my knees, begging, no joke. I did not want to go back home. I was begging her, and she was like, well, I can't keep you because that's illegal. That's kidnapping.
Yeah.
But she was like, here's what the plan. So we called my grandparents. My grandparents said they'd be willing to take me. And then I went to school that Monday, and I had 3 therapists. So I told all 3 of them what was going on. I didn't tell them that I was being abused. I blamed it on the living situations. I was terrified of my mother. And so I was like, I would rather not tell them that she's abusing me, because if this doesn't work out, that's not going to be good for me. Yeah. So I was just like, yeah, no, the house is just really bad and disgusting. And it was, but it got me out. So, but I recommend having the guts to be able to say, and it took me a couple weeks. Actually, I lied. Yeah, it wasn't that Monday that I went back to the school. I think it took me a week or 2 to actually go and tell the school. Yeah, so, but then I told my school, and then a week later, a social service worker came to my house, and she took me away.
Beautiful.
Yeah. So there's always hope in a situation. And I get it. Like, I've been there. I know what it feels like to not feel like you have any hope, and to feel like everything around you is darkness and bad, and you're doomed because of who your parents are. But that's not true. You can decide your own destiny. The story's not written out for you. And please don't commit suicide. Like, I shared with you earlier, like Robin Williams said, suicide is a permanent solution to a temporary problem, and the problem really is temporary. I promise. Yeah. Like, for me, I always thought that it wasn't a temporary, that it was a permanent problem, but it wasn't. See, I'm out of it, and I'm living proof. Like he said, I represent a malpractice insurance. I have a podcast now, and I'm writing a book, and I'm doing all sorts of things that I never in a million years would have thought I could be doing, but I am. And you can do it too. There's nothing special about me. I just chose to actually take the action.
So as we know, and one of the things that I always share with everybody is there's a spirit, there's an energy that runs through us, okay? Mm-hmm. And that spirit's always looking for clarity. Now, what we do in chiropractic with upper cervical chiropractic care is in the top part of the neck, there's a bone called the atlas, which is the top bone of the neck. And when that bone's out of alignment, okay, the messages from the brain don't get to the body correctly, and the messages from the body don't get to the brain correctly. So if there's an imbalance there, it affects all your emotions, it affects your thoughts, and by gently adjusting that area, it can cause your body to start to work the best it can. So one of the things I recommend with people, and not just, if you're thinking about suicide, we're going to give you the 800 number for the suicide hotline. Don't come running to my office if that's what you think you're doing. But what you do is, one of the key things you want to do is, just like Nevaeh shared, you want to make sure you're reaching out, like to a family member. You want to make sure you're doing the right things. You want to make sure you're taking care of yourself as best you can physically. One of the key things is, if you get that upper cervical spine checked, one of the things that can help you do is make clearer thoughts. Because I would say if you're thinking clear and you're connected to that spirit that runs within your body, you're not committing suicide.
Right.
You're not committing suicide. It's when you get so dark that you only think that you're disconnected from that spirit. So you're in a place of such darkness, such fear, such stress that you think there's no other answer. And there's always another answer. Okay. One of the key things I see that's happened in the world is I grew up in a family where went to church. Okay. And so that was just what you did on Sunday. It didn't matter if you were a Baptist. It didn't matter if you were a Christian. You were a Catholic. If you were Jewish, the only difference was you went to temple on Saturday. But everybody had a stronger family foundation. And that family foundation lets you believe in a higher power. Okay. I was a kid. I didn't even really believe it, but I got dragged there every Sunday. And little did I know over time that consciousness built up inside me where I really didn't understand there was a higher power that I could go to in times of trouble. Okay. Where I could always go to. One of the key things we do in chiropractic care is by releasing that power here, allows that messages, that spirit to run through your body. And it's one of the things that can help you. I mean, if you're in a dark place and stuff like that, you can reach out to Nevaeh or myself. You can find us on social media. We can guide you. Okay. I'm not going to be a therapist.
Right.
Okay. One of us is going to guide you to a correct therapist, but we'll tell you what you could do health wise, because a healthy body doesn't commit suicide or doesn't even have a suicidal thought. It's when we put neurotoxins in our body, and those toxins aren't just alcohol and drugs. It's the foods we eat. It's the chemicals they put in our food. It's the chemicals in the air we breathe. All those neurotoxins affect us, cause our body to get out of balance. And that's when the thoughts start to get out of balance. That's when you become negative, and that's when you have a darker thought process.
Right.
And Nevaeh could share with that full time. But now, do you receive chiropractic care now?
I do. I receive chiropractic care I get checked every month because I do upper cervical, so you don't need to be checked as often. But
Okay.
I get every month.
And do you see a difference when you get your adjustment?
Yes, I do. It definitely does help me mentally, and helps me be able to realize one of the biggest things with mental health. I suffer with I'm not really suffer. I'm not gonna say that, but I don't even know how to word it. But suffer sounds like a horrible word. But
yeah,
I struggle a little bit with
struggles about.
Yeah, struggle's better. That I struggle with anxiety, and so I have noticed that when I get adjusted, it does help me. It helps me be able to realize it kind of brings me back down to reality, because I live up here. I live in this little fantasy, weird, bad, crazy
place where you are.
universe.
If we had more 14-year-old people in the world, in the place you are, the world would be more of a blessing, and there would be less stress in the world. There would be less suicide in the world if more people thought the way that you did. Yeah. You don't realize what a blessing you are to the world.
Thank you.
But hang out with me. I'll keep teaching you.
Yeah.
I don't have to teach you. So, and we're going to close in the next minute or so. But if there's anybody out there right now, do you think your age that's saying, hey, you know what, my life isn't that great and stuff like that, give me 20 seconds. What would you recommend they do? And it doesn't have to be they're suicidal. They're just feeling down on themselves, their appearance. They're not happy. They just broke up with their boyfriend. They just, don't have a ton of friends in school. What would you tell them to do?
Journal and walk. Get out and
walk. Okay.
And drink a lot of water. I've noticed that water helps me a lot too, but journaling, because it helps you. That's a really good form of release. It makes you not choose violence or anything else, and it keeps your thoughts a lot clearer. And walking, because you can get out into the nature, and that's where you see God at its finest. And you can just really breathe, just go out in the nature and just deep breathing, and just be oh, look at what God has created. And it will make you so much more grateful.
Amen. And in closing, guys, I want to tell you, just like we started our talk 30 minutes ago, is the world is a beautiful place. It really is. If you look through a 14-year-old's eyes and she's telling you walk and get out and enjoy nature. If you look through my eyes, what I'm going to do as soon as we're done with our podcast, I'm going out and I'm enjoying nature. I'm going down to the beach. I'm going to listen to the waves. And people say, you go all the time. Why do you have to go all the time? I said, because that's where I find my peace. Mm-hmm. And that's what the world is about. I mean, the world is just about taking such good care of ourselves, mentally, spiritually, and physically, okay, that we have pure thoughts, healthy thoughts, we see the world in a good place. And in the law of attraction, the more we think that the world's good, the world will be good. So I want you guys for the next week, man, just see the beauty in the world. We love you. We appreciate you. Any closing thoughts, my friend?
I just want to add one more thing. And if you're that depressed that you're suicidal, since we talked about it a lot, the suicide number, you can call or text it. It's 988. That's it, 988. So
988. That's it.
Yeah.
You just got down 988 on your phone, and that's the suicide hotline.
Yeah.
We love you guys. We appreciate it. We'll see you next week. Have a blessed day. Bye-bye.